of B2B Tech Marketing. I'm Steve Etzler with Business Development Institute, or BDI as many call us. BDI is an event agency that specializes in producing invitation-only thought leadership events for B2B tech companies that attract our clients' buyers. I would like to first thank our panelists, Margaret Malloy, Global Chief Marketing Officer plus Head of Business Development for Siegel+Gale, Mark Birch, Chief Revenue Officer for Hatch and founder and co-organizer of the Enterprise Sales Meetup, Jeff Soriano, Senior Director of Demand Generation for OfferPop, and finally Tim Washer, Executive Producer, Rich Media Marketing for Cisco. And of course, a big thank you to you, our attendees, for investing your valuable time with us today. We have a very simple agenda. The webinar will run for about 60 minutes. I will kick things off by setting up the program with a couple quick slides. Then we will ask a series of questions to our 4 panelists. The last portion of the webinar will be a moderated question and answer session with you, the audience. We strongly encourage your questions, so please submit them through the GoToWebinar platform. For those of you on Twitter, please use the hashtag #BDI1, that's B as in boy, D as in David, I as in Ivan, the number 1, so we all may follow the conversation online. The webinar is being recorded, and we will make the recording available on demand after the event. So with that, let's begin with some introductions. Margaret.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you very much, Steve. It's such a pleasure to join you and the esteemed panelists this afternoon. I am the Global Marketing Officer at Siegel+Gale. We are a global strategic branding firm. I'm personally in New York and excited to engage in the discussion and hear from our audience.
Thanks, Margaret. Mark?
Thanks, Steve, and really glad to be here with this really great panel today and being able to have a chance to share with all of you on the webinar. I am the CRO, Chief Revenue Officer of Hatch, a mobile field sales enablement technology for industrial companies. And I also run the Enterprise Sales Meetup, a community for B2B sales professionals to get together, network, and share new ideas in the field of enterprise B2B sales. And again, just really thankful to be here today with you.
Happy to have you with us, Mark. Jeff.
Hey, Steve. Thanks for having me. So this is Jeff Soriano. I'm the Senior Director of Demand Generation at OfferPop. Here at OfferPop, we have a platform that enables marketers to engage with their consumers through user-generated content, pretty much through the entire consumer journey. So as I kind of fall into it, I am the guy who's really responsible for building the awareness in the pipeline for our sales team, ultimately supporting our new bookings goals.
Thank you, Jeff. And finally, Tim.
Yeah, my name is Tim Washer, and I'm with Cisco. I'm a writer and producer of videos. We do a lot of awareness work and stuff with our voice of the customer, and we try to add some humor to it whenever we can. And I'm based outside of New York. I do some work occasionally on some of the late night shows, and just really would like to see more B2B brands bring humor into their content.
Fantastic. And hopefully you could insert a little bit of humor into this webinar, Tim. So thanks for the introductions, everyone. As I mentioned, I want to start with a couple of setup slides. One thing we know is certain, B2B marketing jobs are changing super fast. And why is that? So number one, everything as we know is converging. My favorite recent buzzword that's going around a lot is a term that many of you may be aware of called smarketing, S-marketing. And really that's sales and marketing coming together as one. I've noticed, certainly in the marketplace, there's been an abundant growth of B2B marketers with a new title such as sales enablement, where they're tying their job directly to sales. And the word marketing is not even appearing in the title anymore. I think this is a great sign. Marketing equals communications, equals PR, equals digital, equals social, equals employee engagement. all need to be integrated around the same business goals. Smart B2B tech companies are organizing around business objectives, not siloed departments as they have in the past. The best B2B tech companies are thinking a lot about how their employees, customers, and prospects actually interact with their brand. We need to provide value at every step across the journey of our employees, customers, and prospects. Great B2B tech companies are thinking about how they're providing value, and they're mapping out that journey depending on who they are. And they're not forgetting about their employees. In fact, they're centering around their employees. Email marketing has long been the go-to tactic for B2B tech marketers. Its effectiveness is leveling off, and many would argue is declining. No longer can we rely on email to achieve our business objectives. So now that we have a little context, let's kick off our all-star panel discussion. First question goes to Margaret. At Siegel+Gale, you do a lot of research on brands. Are there any recent trends that we should be aware of?
Thank you, Steve. And I believe starting with the brand is indeed a wonderful place to start this conversation. By way of context, I would say that what we have seen is very much an evolution of what a brand is. Not so long ago, the term brand meant words and pictures. Well, the big trend now is that's evolved. Brands are no longer merely words and pictures. They are experiences. And essentially, a brand now is a promise brought to life through the experience your constituents have with the firm, whether that be employees, customers, or other audiences. The challenge for us as B2B marketers is to make sure that that brand experience is consistent across the many channels that our audiences now use and have at their disposal. So the goal and intent of consistency has remained the same. The other component that is constant is that a brand must always have a purpose. And it is incumbent on us at firms and those of our clients to help them articulate a purpose which essentially answers the following question. Why does your organization exist? I would submit to us this afternoon that the answer to that question resides at the intersection of the benefits we bring to society and the economic reward for our existence. So while brand has evolved from words and pictures to experiences, the need to articulate a compelling and unique purpose remains constant.
Thank you, Margaret. Sticking with Margaret, given advances in technology, the increasing influence in mobile, digital, and the proliferation of social media, how has this changed the ways that we think about brand today?
I mentioned a moment ago that the channels have proliferated. That's been well documented, and I have colleagues on the panel here who represent different channels. The other component, however, is that the customer is now in the conversation. There was a time when it was popular to talk about storytelling. I would offer that today we need to refine that thinking to story building. A brand participates in the story, but it is built by the audiences of customers, employees, and other constituents. And while customers are involved in the story and they are part of the brand experience, the challenge is making sure that purpose that I talked about before comes to life in each interaction with the brand. The other component that makes it even more difficult is today our customers' expectations are shaped by their experiences across categories. They are not going to merely define you as an insurance company or a healthcare provider, because the experiences they are having in one category is influencing their expectations of you in another category. So the counsel to the customer, to our brands, are you need to look outside your own industry category to be mindful of the expectations that consumers have. The most obvious example of this, of course, has come to life with the trend of bring your own device to work. As consumers became more accustomed to and enjoyed the experience often afforded by the iPhone technology, suddenly they started forming expectations from that they didn't limit to their consumer interactions, but rather that set the bar for the expectations they wanted from their technology at work.
So Margaret, what advice would you give B2B marketers today?
I think the most important advice, in addition to being mindful of articulating a compelling purpose, is look outside your own category and appreciate that your buyers are people too. And their experience, be it with a consumer interaction, will influence their expectations of you, albeit when they go to the office and perform in their professional setting. And the second challenge I pose as counsel to B2B marketers is look at disruptive brands. We've done quite a bit of research at Siegel+Gale on how consumers view different brands, as well as how B2B buyers view them. And we've observed there are a number of characteristics of disruptors. And by disruptors, I mean in the consumer setting, firms like Airbnb, etc. And the characteristics of these firms are they empower people. They reimagine experiences. Look at Blue Apron, how they are reducing the complexity of cooking by delivering proportioned meals and pre-measured ingredients to consumers' kitchens. They are removing friction in a process. Look at how Uber is coming to the aid of pedestrians who can't hail a taxi by sending cars directly to them after just a few taps on your mobile. They are also saving time. Look at the way Fresh Direct requires that we no longer have to go to the store to get our groceries delivered. And the reason why I'm citing these examples in a B2B setting is because each of these examples we all know about in popular culture. But in every B2B industry sector, there are disruptors. And they are sharing those common trends. They're removing friction in a process. They're saving users time. They're reimagining experience. And they are empowering people. So in sum, my advice to my B2B marketing clients is look at the disruptors in consumer and in your category and figure out how you don't become the disrupted, the incumbent who is indeed disrupted. Figure out fast how you can employ some of their best practices to essentially set you apart. And if you don't, it's at your peril.
Great feedback and advice. Thank you, Margaret. So I need to make an edit on the next slide per Margaret's feedback, because the question that Tim Washer from Cisco is going to answer is why is storytelling more important than ever? But I'm going to change that to why is story building per Margaret more important than ever, Tim?
Yeah, like Margaret said, how we define the brand now has changed quite a bit. Can you hear me okay? I'm hearing a little static now.
I hear you fine.
Okay. So people, the same things that have changed expectations on the customer side over the last few years are changing what we need to do as marketers. And we're battling, we're facing challenges of, just a shrinking attention span and more competition for that attention. And that's one of the reasons. I think the current stats are there are 300 hours of video being uploaded to YouTube every single minute. So to stand out, you're really not going to have a shot if you just go out there and talk, if a brand's just talking about itself. It needs to tell stories about how it connects and supports its customers. Or in B2B, I think what works well is when we tell stories about our customers' customers. How do we help organizations better serve their customers? And those stories tend to be more emotional. We can kind of get to these emotive benefits that the brand offers, and that really connects with people. And that's, from a social media content marketing standpoint, that's what people are expecting now, is some kind of an emotional connection.
Tim, sticking with you, what are the secrets to effective content marketing? And tell us a little bit more about your specialty, which is humor.
Yeah, so one thing we do in our Voice of the Customer team is we will go and find customers where we can, like I was saying earlier, tell their story, and we take ourselves out of the equation. We don't necessarily mention our brand or our products, and that's tough for a lot of traditional marketers. That's a big change. But if we stay focused on how this makes a difference on their customers, we can get to an interesting story. And that's also a great place to bring humor into it. And sometimes we'll do that just improvised. We've done this series called Fast IT and the Slow Waiter, just where I played a waiter and interviewed some CIOs from a big company in a restaurant. And that's just because that's the only place we could get to film this video that worked for us. And we were at a big conference, and one of the things we did is we said, okay, we'll do these interviews, but we cannot film them like in a conference room, just because when you're filming video or an interview like that, a conference room is just going to have a very stuffy influence over the conversation. If you get out to a different place, just visually it looks a lot more interesting for people to watch, and it also just sets the person you're interviewing in a more lively spirit, I guess, and they're a lot more open to being playful and telling the story in a fun way. And then one other thing specifically on the humor side, and a lot of B2B brands will say, yeah, humor just does not fit our brand at all. But I think if you look at customers, I mean, everybody likes to laugh. And as long as you kind of avoid the traditional pitfalls of, obviously you want to stay away from politics or religion, just any issues that might upset people. You might want to make sure you're not. This cannot be misunderstood as making fun of a group or attacking a person, with the humor. Then you're fairly safe. And so we stay with those guidelines, and we try to also. A very easy way to start coming up with a humorous concept is to focus on the pain that the customer's pain that you can take away. What's the pain point that you're solving? And focus on that pain, heighten it a bit to this absurd level, and then kind of create some humor from there. And that helps you not only get some entertainment created, which the customers always appreciate, viewers always appreciate, but also it shows empathy because it shows that you understand what the pain point is.
So sticking with video, Tim, why are visual and, of course, video-based content trumping everything else?
Well, again, it's a lot of the fact that the expectations have changed just because of the shifts in the market that Margaret was talking about over the last 5 or 6 years. People expect that now. They want to consume information in a way that's a lot more rich, and they want to get to the point and understand that point much faster, again, thanks to shrinking attention spans. It's so you can convey so much more information so much faster in an image or a video. 3M, I believe, did research years ago that showed that the mind processes visual information 80,000 times faster than we do verbal. So it's just a way to connect with people and get your point across in a much more fast way. But then also, again, of course, it's just a lot more engaging. Video, you can bring music in, you can change the tone, you have a lot more control over how content's delivered versus giving it to someone in text.
So the next question is for Jeff, and I think Mark wants to contribute on this as well. Why has persona marketing exploded? What's behind all that?
I mean, and that's a pretty good question, Steve. I think it has to go back to a lot of the fact that there's a lot of noise out there. We've talked about this, the two of us, that there's just so much content being created, and it's hard for people to just find the time to digest all of it. And as B2B marketers, we know we need to break through a lot of that noise. And to me, the persona aspect of it is important because it provides relevance, right? So I'm talking to somebody about something that is important to them. It actually would potentially have some sort of impact on what they're doing. So again, as a B2B marketer, I need to make sure that I'm talking to my personas about the right things, about the right business objectives, using the right vernacular. Otherwise, you're just kind of talking at them and just kind of creating more noise. So ideally, I think it really just comes back to this idea of relevance and making sure that you understand what's relevant to those people. Because you can't just, like you said in the beginning, you can't just bombard people with emails. You need to be talking to them in multiple channels. So how do you make sure that when you're talking to them, it actually aligns with their business objectives and needs?
Mark, did you want to kick in a little bit on this?
Yeah, no, I completely concur. Thinking from the sales perspective, when you're out there as a B2B sales professional trying to reach out to many of these audiences, to your buyers, there's so many messages that are out there. So if you're not speaking to relevance, if you're not speaking to pains that really matter for folks, then your messaging just goes right over people's heads. And I really think that persona marketing is really filtered into the way that we think about sales and the way that we engage with prospects. And getting that alignment is really key, because if you don't have those personas, if you haven't really studied and figured out, well, who are you trying to talk to? Who are you trying to have a relationship with? Who are you trying to engage? Then it cascades down to the lists that you build. It cascades down into the messaging you craft, the way that you engage, the way you qualify, and all of that waterfall effect is driven by personas. Get it wrong, and you get no engagement all the way through that chain. So being able to get those personas and really understand those personas and flesh them out is so critical for getting your message through.
So I want to stay on this persona thing a little bit, because there's so much focus on it that I see in the industry. And you guys did a good job as to answering the question, why? I'm going to throw another question in there that we didn't plan for, which is how. How do we do this?
Yeah, I mean, this is Jeff. I'd happy to talk about a little bit about that. There's two parts to that. How do you create your personas, and then how do you connect with them? How you create them is one part sitting down and really saying to yourself, what are their challenges? What are their key objectives? And saying, okay, let's figure those out as like business problems. And then looking at, okay, so if you were to ask them, what do you want? So, I want to, and then what would they answer with? And as you go back and you look at what your company offers or what you provide, solutions, services, how does that actually solve for that problem, right? So as you build out your personas, sometimes it's even important to start back at product and say, what do we actually do? What do we offer people? And then, okay, how does that tie back into what they want and their business challenges? And then how does that tie back into a message that would resonate with that persona? So that's kind of how you're building them out. And then going back, to this idea of building out lists and understanding where you're going, you have to understand where these people are. What are they engaging with? What's important to them? And just making actually all of those.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. I think also part of that, maybe I can get into
this
it later
place,
on.
we need to be there.
Oh, but what I would say is that this is where sales and marketing really come together, because once you draw out all these personas and you have a kind of a fictionalized understanding of who you're trying to reach out to, sales provides the kind of the trigger to say, yeah, that's right, or no, we need to kind of maybe dial that back and rethink what we believe that original persona is. So it becomes a really interesting feedback loop between marketing and sales that says, okay, well, here we have this framework for what we think is our ideal customer profile and the personas they're in. And then sales can start to drive information back into organization, back to marketing. It says, yeah, we're going in the right direction, or we should really rethink this and refine.
Margaret, did you want to add something to this?
I think the persona marketing speaks to the importance of humanizing your brand. And it's another manifestation of the phenomena that I mentioned in the beginning, which is B2B buyers are people too. What I like about the growth and emphasis in persona-based marketing is that done well, persona marketing puts texture around the archetype that was previously a CIO or a CMO as your buyer. The trick is to do it in a way that has enough texture that we achieve the relevance that Jeff wanted to, as well as the scale that Mark desires to achieve the sales and business development goals. So it is an art and a science. I've seen it done poorly, and when it's done poorly, it's just another type of input into a brochure. When it's done well, it can achieve the humor that Tim's looking for in a way that resonates, and most important, it can help achieve the business impact and get the emotional connection because you're treating buyers as humans as opposed to check signing machines.
Well, thank you all for contributing on that. Very related to persona marketing is the next question, which I'll admit is a little self-serving for BDI. And also in full transparency, we are working with both Siegel+Gale and OfferPop on private events. So I will ask Margaret and Jeff to weigh in on this question, which is why are more tech marketers doing smaller targeted private events versus larger trade shows?
Sure, I can definitely weigh in on that. I mean, it goes back to everything we were just talking about. It's relevance, it's talking to the right personas, and it's quite frankly, it's account-based marketing. You know, you can go to a trade show and spend a similar amount of money and try to do hit up every single person that's there and talk to them and try to quickly get a message across in 2 to 5 minutes at the most, or you can really go back and build a really targeted event that is based around that person's business objectives, that person's personas, and again, working and saying, okay, based on personas, based on what our business does, who we serve, who are our ideal prospects, who do we want in the room, what companies, what roles, and quite frankly, that's what these events offer. It's the ability to go back and say, these are the people we want. This is who we want to talk to. This is the overarching, more important thing I want to say. And I don't want to do it in 5 minutes, quite candidly. I want a couple hours. I want a half day. And that's where it goes back to the idea that marketing, just like sales, it's about building relationships and trusted relationships. And that's a great deal of what these events provide marketers.
Margaret, did you want to offer something on this as well?
Certainly. I think each, if you will, marketing tactic, be it sponsored programming or private events, must all fit in the context of a portfolio of your marketing plan. So there is a place for many tactics, and I consider the private events to be a very powerful one. I don't see it as an either-or, though. I see it as part of mechanisms to achieve your marketing plan. And for me, the secret is less about which tactics you do at which frequency. It's more about how you integrate all of your programming such that your content holds hands with your private event, such that your sponsorship has speakers on stage that maps to your PR. So being thoughtful about all your marketing mix, it's really that old basics, isn't it? Being thoughtful about the marketing mix and how it all is reinforcing in an integrated way that helps you achieve the kind of scale you need. Private events are a wonderful way to achieve that white glove treatment. They are very useful for firms like ourselves that arguably have a small addressable market. For a larger enterprise, the challenge is balancing scale with touch. Mark touched on this around the challenges for SaaS-based companies and his expertise in helping them build their pipeline. I see a powerful role for events, private events in particular, but they must be done intelligently and planned appropriately, because all of us who are on both seller and buyer side are in receipt of so many invitations to events that we have choices to make. So it's incumbent on anyone who's embracing a private event model to do it in a thoughtful way and recognize that it's not a panacea. It has to be strategic. The programming has to be compelling, and to get the most from it, it must integrate with the other elements in your marketing mix.
Thank you both for that. So the next question goes out to Mark. How are leading B2B techs using a mobile-first strategy?
I think this question really has two perspectives, Steve. The first is really how we use mobile to reach out to our constituent audience. One of the things that I've noticed in particular, and I think we can all agree on the call, is we're seeing a lot more consumer behavior seep into the B2B buying cycle and the way that people are consuming information, researching information, and what that ultimately means is that mobile is becoming, in many ways, the first screen of engagement when you're marketing to someone, when your sales team doing outbound sales work. And so what this kind of boils down to is the content that we used to send a decade ago or even 5 years ago. We really need to reshape and rethink that the way that that content appears in this mobile screen, and really thinking from the perspective of, well, how do I shorten, how do I make that content more impactful in smaller real estate? Because nowadays people, they may use their desktop or laptop to consume information, but more and more readily they're looking for fast information quickly. And whether that's an email that you send, whether it's your website, whatever videos, as I mentioned before with Tim, all that stuff, we really need to think about it being consumed on a screen that doesn't allow for a lot of verbosity. The other side of this is, I think about how mobile is really revolutionizing the way we do work. Just from my own perspective, we're providing a technology for field sales teams to go out and just be more effective out in the field. Get more information faster, to get more information on customers quicker, to just be able to do things a lot more quickly than before. And mobile technologies are becoming that conduit for doing that. And I speak from a sales perspective, but the same thing is also happening from the digital marketer's perspective, is I need information quickly, and the way I'm going to get that, presumably, is going to be via the thing that is closest to me. That's my mobile phone.
Did anyone else want to offer a thought about mobile?
This is Jeff. I think just, in tying mobile into a larger category, I think it just goes back to, and this is a lot of what's already been said, but just thinking about it, and again, that idea of personas and relevance and everything, and how are people using their mobile phones. Just always make sure you're considering how they're using it when you're building out that strategy. Don't try to create new behaviors. Try to understand and leverage current behaviors. And that's the only thing that I would probably add to what was a very well said statement about all of it.
Yeah, I definitely agree. The thing I think we forget is that we push these messages out, and they're not really, we don't really think about the location that's received in. But mobile has a much more personal element to it. It's a device that's with us a lot of the times during the day, and with us in our travels, and when we do a lot of work, as well as a lot of personal stuff. So that's also something to consider when we start to develop those personas. That actually has a lot to do with thinking about content that's delivered to mobile devices.
Jeff, how do you engage your buyers on social media?
So I think that question ties in perfectly to what we were just talking about. You know, again, these questions are almost layering themselves perfectly around, you know, the idea of personas and the idea of relevance and the idea of mobile and location and how people are using all this stuff. Social is just another place where we need to understand how people are using it. So, you know, I can kind of tell you, like, I look at Twitter and I say to myself, what is Twitter as it relates to my B2B business? And I almost look at it like a news source for people, right? So, you know, people often go there to get very, you know, bite-sized pieces that then lead them to a larger story. So for a lot of organizations, including our own, like I try to take that very strong 80-20 rule of like share 80% industry information that's you know, customer-centric and not company-centric. And then 20% of the time, maybe share some of your own company-centric stuff. Let people come to you and have that be a channel where you're a thought leader. And then, you know, Facebook is a completely different beast, right? Like, think about what you're doing when you're going through Facebook. You know, you're looking at your friends, family, you're looking at their content, but you're often, again, engaging with media and reading articles and what this is. So, you know, for social, I know sometimes we want to use social to drive leads like names, but sometimes you can use social like Facebook particularly because everybody's putting paid dollars into it now, and that's just the evolution of how Facebook's algorithm has kind of made us and forced us to spend money with them. But you know, think about it. Maybe Facebook isn't a lead gen channel. Maybe it becomes a referral channel to your website, right? So rather than saying, here's an advertisement for an ebook, and what are the chances someone really wants to read an ebook while they're going through Facebook, maybe it's more like, here's a topic, go to our blog and read about it. Take a page right out of the media companies who are just dominating in Facebook as it relates to visibility versus, you know, technology or B2B companies. Kind of lastly then, like looking at LinkedIn, it's like now you're going back to, here's a channel where you can start to think about it as a social channel and how it supports, you know, the really great targeting and really going after specific verticals and roles. And again, who are my personas? Who do I want to target? So I start to think of LinkedIn more as like an account-based marketing solution where I can go back and say, you know, my sales team has a target account that consists of these 150 companies that they want us to get the right contacts into our database so we can set up meetings this quarter. So I'm looking at LinkedIn is focusing and helping me with my account-based stuff. Specifically with their acquisition of Bizdo, I mean, what used to potentially be a third-party data play for LinkedIn is now a first-party data play for them. So that's a big deal. So again, like look at your social channels and think about what roles do they actually play in the marketing journey versus traditionally just looking at them and saying, okay, I'm going to put dollars behind lead gen here, here, and here. It's like, yeah, maybe Twitter is helping you promote yourself as a thought leader. Maybe Facebook is being used to refer traffic to your website. Maybe LinkedIn is supporting your account-based structure. So I think about social channels and what aspects of their marketing strategy they help me gain against my objectives.
Margaret, I've followed and interacted with you on LinkedIn and Twitter for quite a while, and remain very impressed with your level of engagement with so many people, the thought leadership that you share, and just in general the way that you embrace these technologies to connect with so many different people. How do you do it?
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. First, I would say I would agree with everything Jeff said, so I don't need to be redundant with his very strategic assessment that each platform can play a different role. For me, there are a couple of components in addition to the ones Jeff illustrated. The first one is social is a super powerful way to listen. So Jeff made the point that, and I think it's a powerful one, that 80-20 rule in terms of publishing your own content or amplifying your own stuff versus others. But there is that other element of social is a great way to know what your buyers care about. It is the most powerful market research tool and at Siegel+Gale, I run our business development function as well as our marketing. When a prospective client is on Twitter or LinkedIn, there is no better way to have a mechanism to understand what's on their mind. So that's the first thing. Don't underestimate the power of these tools from a listening perspective. Personally, you asked, how do I do it? Before I go to the how, I should address the why. I believe that as a leader in an organization, my context marketing and all of our audience in many ways are leaders in their own organizations. I believe it's our job to be active on social. There was a time in a bygone era where leaders in companies would walk the shop floor or walk the factory floor, if you will, as a way to have a pulse on where the market is. I would submit to you today that social media allows all of us to walk our own shop floors at scale. So that's why I do it. I also do it because, as I suggested earlier, B2B buyers are humans too. So to the extent that you can connect to someone on a human level, you are building a more textured and richer and hopefully more enduring relationship. So it's not just for the thrill of a retweet. It is a very strategic intent that I use when I employ social media. In terms, very briefly, on the how, for me it's important to think about social media in this context not as something I do in addition to all the other things we do at work, but rather to integrate that into our workflows. So if we get to work in the morning and we enjoy the news, or if we like to read in our commute, or if at the end of the day we enjoy perusing news, how do you make sure that you integrate social into your existing behaviors? Jeff made that excellent point earlier from a marketing perspective that our goal shouldn't be to try to change people's behaviors, but to adapt to existing behaviors. I believe that same principle applies on how we as leaders ourselves need to use social. We're not going to get any more hours in the day last time I checked. So we have to figure out how can we integrate social into our existing daily workflows in a way that makes the frequency meaningful and the engagement high impact and high touch.
Tim or Mark, did you want to weigh in this as well? I know you both do also a great job using social media yourselves.
Yeah, I mean, there's really not much to add. I mean, Margaret provided just a really good rundown of social and what it means, but you're just really diving down into it has to be something that you make as part of what you do and who you are. So much about what we do, particularly in sales, comes down to being perceived as, in a sense of thought leadership. When you're engaging in front of a customer, they're looking to you to be the expert. And we don't necessarily have to be on Twitter all the time, but to at least have thoughts and opinions that are out there that you can share, that you can have conversations around. And that's the most important part about trying to create this world of engagement, is having something relevant to talk about. And if you do have all this great information and experience, it's worth exploring, whether it's LinkedIn as your channel of choice, or Twitter, or whatever it may be, maybe a Tumblr blog, but to use these as tools as part of your toolkit for building those customer relationships.
Thank you, Mark and Margaret. So going a little bit off on a tangent here, but staying with the social media topic, clearly you are both leaders, you both get it, you both use it, you understand the why, and you certainly demonstrate the how. Just check out your personal Twitter handles or your LinkedIn profiles, and it becomes apparent very quickly and clearly. Can you share, and this goes for anyone on the panel, maybe an example or a story about how you can get a leader in an organization that maybe doesn't buy into it still in terms of using it themselves. Is it worth working with them to try and convince a CEO, a CMO of your company to embrace it? Or are there people that are just built for it and people that aren't?
I can jump in quickly. I think it's like anything that's essentially rooted in change management. In the notion of changing behaviors is difficult. So to reinforce the point, figure out a way to integrate it into his or her existing workflow. That's the first point. Second point I would make is, and Mark touched on this, one of the largest reasons why executives, in my experience, do not embrace social is because they fear they don't have anything relevant or interesting to say. And particularly executives at companies, they set a very high bar for themselves for what constitutes interesting and relevant and provocative and all those good things. So helping them link content and their thought leadership and consider these social platforms as distribution vehicles for what they already do a great job of creating in terms of content. And the final point is, and this can appeal to many executives, being on social media is a really powerful risk mitigation tool. What I mean by that is, in the event that your company is in a crisis situation and you want, as a CEO or CMO, to have a point to articulate your firm's point of view on an issue, having fluency and facility with social media to be ready for that scenario and to be able to go on Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever your platform is appropriate is to present your organization's point of view is very powerful. So you're not in this era waiting for the media to tell the story and provide the interpretation of the crisis that is in line with what your brand wants. So in sum, inspire your executives to think that they have something worthwhile to say, and if that's not incentivizing them, work through that risk mitigation argument. Very often, different profiles of CEOs will respond to the sort of carrot stick incentive model. Knowing your own executive and which one is most likely to strike a chord will inform the degree of emphasis you put on each of the benefits.
Great points, thank you. So Jeff, I'm going to toss the ball back your way. What are the most effective demand generation strategies? Talk us through why you do what you do and how.
Yeah, sure. So I think that this is a tough one, right? Because I could probably talk for an entire hour just on this. But I think it goes back to the most effective demand gen strategies are ones that are not built around campaigns. They're not built around programs. They're built around the market. So, they're focused on, so let's go back and take a step back even further. Let's talk about what demand gen really is, right? And it's creating a business environment where people are like, I need that, right? So how do you get people to need what your company is selling? You need to align it to business strategies. You need to align it to business objectives. You need to align it to trends that are happening into the market, and then tie yourself into that story. Again, back how it ties into those personas, those people, those business objectives. And I think one of the biggest statements that I've kind of heard today, and Margaret said it a couple times, was going back to the why. Demand gen strategies very often get built around the what and the how. And in order to really create demand for something, there needs to be a why. Like, why is this important? Why should I prioritize this over something else? Because more and more B2B tech companies aren't, well, most companies in general, we're not really fighting against our competitors out of the gate. We're fighting for a line item in the budget. And so sometimes that doesn't even mean like, okay, again, offer pop, like, hey, listen, we might not even be fighting against an offer pop competitor as we go out there for our demand gen. We're fighting for awareness from a director, VP, CMO that this is a strategy or an initiative that they should be focused on that's more important than potentially one of the others. So demand gen strategies, really effective ones, start with thought leadership that is focused on why. Not what, not how. What and how is great for when you're trying to move people through the funnel. So great, you've gotten this person on board. Now you start to nurture them around the what and the how, and ultimately getting them to a point of consideration where you pass them to a salesperson. But great demand gen strategies are built around the why.
Yeah, Jeff, I mean, that's so true. I guess, have you read the book by Simon Sinek, Begins with Why or Starts with Why?
I haven't read it personally, but I have heard of it, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, he talks exactly to that point where there's no excitement around what or how, but you drive excitement, engagement, interest when you talk about why you're doing something. What was the motivation? What was the impetus? And so often in B2B tech, we talk about features and products and functions. In the SaaS world, we're immersed in it, and it's useful, but it's not a starting point.
So the next question is one that just coming up all the time, and there's so many ways to take it. But how are the best marketers using data to support their goals? And just to add a little bit more about what's behind this question is, there's so many great technologies, some of which are on the phone today, that B2B marketers are using to achieve their goals. Most of these technologies, part of their value proposition is providing insight, which starts with data and making sense of it and so on. There's more data than ever, and it's not only internal, it's external, and being able to bridge the gap. How do, Jeff, we'll start with you, and then I welcome others to contribute to this. How do you get your arms around it from a strategic standpoint in terms of how to best use data?
Yeah, it's a good question, Steve, and one that, the minute I start to answer it, I start to question myself a little bit. But, data is one of these things where I think at one point we didn't, as marketers, maybe have as much. And so we started just like this. We need as much as possible. And it's kind of like, we were all good businesses growing up for a long time. We've missed the mark a little bit on technologies is data ultimately shouldn't be making decisions. It should be informing decisions. So when I go back and just say, how are the best marketers using data to support their goals, they're looking at it to help them make educated decisions. So to give a clear example of that, right, like you might put a bunch of money into LinkedIn, and let's just say you put it out there and it doesn't generate the leads, it doesn't generate the opportunities you're looking for. The data would say that that's a bad lead source, but the reality is there's tons of variables. Was it a bad piece of content? Did you do the wrong targeting? Was there a major event happening in that retail or that vertical, like maybe retail in the holiday season or something, that was impacting the ability for the data to be valuable? And, there's so many things to go in. So I could talk about this, another topic, for hours, but I'll just quickly summarize it as marketers, be smart about using data to help inform your decisions, but don't allow it to start making your decisions. That's kind of my overarching sentiment there.
Sounds wise to me. Would anyone else like to chime in on this?
I would add, Steve, that our profession as marketers, whether we be on the sales side or the creative or the technology side, is always a balance of art and science. And the data, as others have indicated, can provide inputs into the science, but there will always be a place for what I've dubbed story building, or the creative, or that great idea, or the humor that Tim and his team do so well. So they must take, if you will, equal billing in our marketing and business development strategies.
So Mark, we saved the last question for you because after all, so much of this, at least in the B2B tech world, boils down to sales. And I touched on this a little bit in my opening slides, but how will, in the future, marketing enable sales?
Well, thanks for leaving the best for last. But it's a massive question. But I'm just going to put it out there. I mean, without marketing, sales is just running blind, and that just speaks to the importance of having a really well thought out marketing strategy with a team behind it to really support it. Because ultimately, without the targets, the personas, the lists, the events, all that funnels into providing sales the funnel to generate business and to drive revenue. And like you mentioned, Steve, there's this convergence that's just been really fluid, but has been accelerating over the past few years between marketing and sales. I mean, one good example is this explosion in SDR teams, or sales development rep teams. And the question is it marketing? Is it sales? Because this is an organization that particularly a lot of technology companies are building to do a lot of outbound prospecting. So calls, cadences of emails out to a set list of prospects as an engine for developing leads and nurturing them and passing those off to field reps or account executives. So having a marketing organization, particularly thinking through and helping to define personas, the messaging, and how all that flows into the sales process is critical. The other thing I'd say is we've talked about a lot of different channels, whether it's thinking about video and what Tim mentioned about the value of it, or talking about social with Jeff's comments and Margaret's comments. It all comes down to there's so many different ways to engage, and as a sales rep, you're kind of wondering, well, what do I use as my assets to reach out to these constituencies? And that's where I think marketing can really help structure and lead the way by helping sales teams to understand, well, okay, here's this content. Well, let's break it down into things that could be really good from a social perspective, things that could be great for email outreach, things that could be good for vignettes or stories when you have those in-person interactions, and to tie all that to this whole model around personas and customer models. So that's where I think that has the most impact in helping sales to figure out, well, what type of tools am I using, and how do I use it, and allow the sales organization to execute using these great assets that marketing has created.
So thank you for that. We're just about out of time. I did want to address a few audience questions real quickly, certainly. John asks, you see consumers talking to companies all the time. Look at airlines, Shake Shack, etc. But B2Bs don't typically engage each other as organizations, according to John. Can you give any examples of those who you think do?
This is Jeff. I guess I would say when you talk about how engaging each other, I guess that, it's kind of hard to say exactly what that means. But as a B2B technology marketer, I engage a lot with our partner ecosystem. So I might be working with a partner on an event, or I might be working on content. So we actually engage with each other quite a bit in an effort to support each other's demand gen goals. That's why we're partnering together. We make each other a good fit. So we're constantly retweeting each other's stuff, or sharing each other's stuff, or promoting each other's content. So yeah, we do actually have a fair share of engagement with other B2B companies. It might be a little selfish in that we're working together on stuff, but that's kind of how we do it.
Thanks. The next question is from Margaret specifically, and this comes from Brian. Margaret, while consistency is important, should creative and branding be customized based on the channel?
The short answer is yes and. meaning you must articulate a brand purpose that is unique and compelling. It can come to life in different ways based on the channel. Best example of that is a logo. It needs now to be much more flexible in a world where we are accessing it on billboards, in trade conferences, and in mobile. So the answer is succinctly yes and.
Well, thank you. That is all the time we have. I want to be respectful of everyone's schedule. So again, I'd like to thank our panelists, Margaret Malloy from Siegel+Gale, Mark Birch from Hatch Enterprise Sales Meetup, Jeff Soriano from OfferPop, Tim Washer from Cisco, and of course, thank you to all of our attendees. We hope you found it informative. Again, the entire webinar will be available on demand very soon. We will send you the link. We hope to see you again. Have a good day.